everyone. For this next mapping video, I am going to show you how to make an intensity map using Google Fusion. And the question that I'm working on here is to create an intensity map using the list of donations to Dennis Kucinich that shows where his support comes from. So an intensity map according to the amount of money raised in each state. And an intensity map, here's a picture of one, is a map where the geographical areas are colored in different colors to indicate the level of some variable within them. And so unlike the earlier maps that we've made, unlike the heat map and you're just putting the pins in there, this is not mapping the individual rows, it's mapping a value attached to each state. And so there are two things that we have to do that make this trickier. The first thing that we have to do is figure out what the value is for each state that Fusion Tables is supposed to map. And then the second thing is tell Google Fusion Tables what the state boundaries are. And so let's do it. All right. So, here's the data we've been working with, this Kucinich. But rather than use the data already uploaded there, we're going to work on it in Excel a little more to get it in shape. So, on the other two maps, we were loading up every individual location. Now, what we want to for the intensity map, what we need to load up is the value for each state, for each geographical area. So, data, pivot tables. All right. So, what we want the value for each state. So, we'll put the state in the rows. And then, what we want for each state is the donations. But we don't want the count of donations. What we want is the total amount of money. So this is the sum of donations from each state. So it's actually a little more similar to that weighted heat table or heat map, if that makes sense. All right, so here it is. Now what we have, where before we had a list of every donor, now what we have is a list of states, and then the sum of money donated in that state. And then we have the grand total down here, which we'll be careful not to include. So I'm going to copy this. I'm just going to create a whole new new workbook. Edit, paste special. Values, right? And then we're going to call this state. And then we'll call this money raised. And we are going to save this workbook under a new name. File, save as. Why don't we just call it workbook 10? All right. So now we're going to go back over to our Google Fusion Tables. File, new table. And now, first thing, we're going to upload our data. There it is. Next. Yep. All right, and here is this list up here. Now, we could have it just sort of map this, but it wouldn't be able to put the nice borders in, the nice state borders in. So what we have to do now is we've totaled the amount of money for each state, and now we have to do what's called a merge to connect this with a spreadsheet that has the shape files in it. And with all things computer, if you want to know how to do something like this, if you Google, how do I make an intensity map in Google Fusion, you'll get some good advice. But then what I'm going to Google here is Google Fusion state boundaries. And what we find is a free spreadsheet of, well, this went straight to it. This is fine. Let me Google something slightly different. Make the word merge in there. And what we get is a help page, but this here is the same thing. This is a link to a state boundaries. It's called a shape file or a tiger file. This is actually a file produced by the U.S. Census Bureau for everybody to use, which shows the, and this is what it looks like. 56 values, and you'll see some of these values are like, I don't know why there's a filter on here. But anyway, so we have this shape file we're going to be using. All right, what we do now, File, Merge. Now it's going to ask us what sort of file we want to merge with. Now you can merge any two files that have an identical column in them, but where is it? Merge state boundaries, U.S. state congressional district boundaries. Here it is. Control C, copy the URL, merge with, Control V, next. Now what we're done. Now we need it to tell. We need to tell it which column on this table, on our table, we want it to match up with on the other table, and they have to be exactly the same. Well, so that won't work, will it? Oh, there we go. Postal ID. Some of these you won't recognize because it includes protectorates in here and whatnot. American Samoa is AS. I shouldn't say protectorates. All right. Now, a common problem here is if you try to merge columns that aren't exactly the same, for example, postal abbreviations with full state names, it will not work. Okay, so what has happened here is these first two columns are the same as our original spreadsheet. But what Google has done is for each of these rows, it's looked up the values, it's looked in the other spreadsheet for the row that had this value, and then brought the geometry over, which is the shape file, the definition of the shapes. And so we can now create our map. So this is our intensity map. And just to review what's going on here, Fusion Tables is looking at our data here. And instead of dropping a pin for each item on here, what it's doing is it's drawing in a shape. And that's what these are here. But much like with the pin map, it's not really giving any other information beyond drawing each shape that is on the spreadsheet. And of course there are some duplicates, just drawing them over and over on top of each other. So we can reformat it though to be a little more useful. So right now, so feature match, change feature styles. Click on that. Polygon background colors, use one color. Maybe use multiple colors, but I'm going to use the buckets for this. You can also use gradient, and it works very similarly. Gradient works by adjusting the color on a scale, and with buckets, it's a little more discrete. So what we're going to tell the computer to do is to look in the column money raised, and we can't actually even change that because that's the only really numeric column on the spreadsheet. So it's So it's going to look in money raised and then divide it into a certain number of buckets with a different color in each bucket according to the money raised. So I'm going to click on the use this range here, and that will be the full range of data that we got. And then it automatically adjusted so the two colors, these aren't very vivid colors, are they? I'm going to make more buckets. I'm going to have 4 buckets. And it kept the same range. And then, whether or not these are a logical set of colors, gradient might make a little more sense here. So let's just run it and see how this looks. Yeah, now the states are slightly different colors according to how much money was raised. Oh, sorry about that. Let me get back there. Slightly different colors according to how much money was raised. It'd be nice if there was a legend on here, but there doesn't seem to be. Let's look at the gradient, and let's just look at what the gradient does. Feature studies. So instead of the buckets, we can do it as a gradient. Again, we want to use that range. There we go. And of course, we can change the color. Again, it's basing this on the money raised. And now it's shades of green according to how much money gave to Kucinich. So that is the intensity map. All right. Well, good luck with these, and we will be in touch. Talk to you this evening.